as well as previous Congresses, Zurich 1953, Stuttgart 1952, and London 1951. None of the delegates representing the rocket and spaceflight societies of all the countries involved had strong feelings on the subject of saucers. Their attitude was essentially the same as professional members of the American Rocket Society in this country. In other words, there appear to be no confirmed saucer fans in the hierarchy of the professional societies. I continue to follow the subject of UFOs primarily because of my being requested for comment on the interplanetary flight aspects. My personal feelings have not changed in the past 4 years, although I continue to keep an objective outlook. There are many other prominent scientists in the world whom I met while I was chief of Project Blue Book who, I'm sure, would give the same answer. They've not been able to find any proof, but they continue to keep an objective outlook. There are just enough big question marks sprinkled through the reports to keep their outlook objective. I know that there are many other scientists in the world who, although they haven't studied the Air Force's UFO files, would limit their comment to a large laugh followed by an "it can't be." But "it can't be's" are dangerous, if for no other reason than history has proved them so. Not more than 100 years ago, 2 members of the French Academy of Sciences were unseated because they supported the idea that stones had fallen from the sky. Other distinguished members of the French Academy examined the stones. "It can't be. Stones don't fall from the sky," or words to that effect. "These are common rocks that have been struck by lightning." Today, we know that the stones from the sky were meteorites. Not more than 50 years ago, Dr. Simon Newcomb, a world-famous astronomer and the first American since Benjamin Franklin to be made an associate of the Institute of France, the hierarchy of the world science, said, "It can't be." Then he went on to explain that flight without gas bags would require the discovery of some new material or a new force in nature. And at the same time, Rear Admiral George W. Melville, then Chief Engineer for the U.S. Navy, said that attempts to fly heavier-than-air vehicles was absurd. Just a little over 10 years ago, there was another "it can't be." Ex-President Harry S. Truman recalls in the first volume of the Truman Memoirs what Admiral William D. Leahy, then Chief of Staff to the President, had to say about the atomic bomb. "That is the biggest fool thing we have ever done," he is quoted as saying. "The bomb will never go off, and I speak as an expert in explosives." Personally, I don't believe that "it can't be." I wouldn't class myself as a believer exactly, because I've seen too many UFO reports that first appeared to be unexplainable fall to pieces when they were thoroughly investigated. But every time I begin to get skeptical, I think of the other reports. The many reports made by experienced pilots and radar operators, scientists, and other people who know what they're looking at. These reports were thoroughly investigated, and they are still unknowns. Of these reports, the radar visual sightings are the most convincing. When a ground radar picks up a UFO target and a ground observer sees a light where the radar target is located, then a jet interceptor is scrambled to intercept the UFO, and the pilot also sees the light and gets a radar lock-on only to have the UFO almost impudently outdistance him, there is no simple answer. We have no aircraft on this Earth that can at will so handily outdistance our latest jets. The Air Force is still actively engaged in investigating UFO reports, although during the past 6 months there have been definite indications that there is a movement afoot to get Project Blue Book to swing back to the old Project Grudge philosophy of analyzing UFO reports. Write them all off, regardless. But good UFO reports cannot be written off with such answers as fatigued pilot seeing a balloon or star, green radar operators with only 15 years experience watching temperature inversion caused blips on their radar scopes, or a mild form of mass hysteria or war nerves. Using answers like these, or similar ones, to explain the UFO reports is an expedient method of getting the percentage of unknowns down to 0, but it is no more valid than turning the hand of a clock ahead to make time pass faster. Twice before, the riddle of the UFO has been solved, only to have the reports increase in both quantity and quality. I wouldn't want to hazard a guess as to what the final outcome of the UFO investigation will be, but I am sure that within a few years there will be a proven answer. The Earth Satellite Program, which was recently announced, research progress in the fields of electronics, nuclear physics, astronomy, and a dozen other branches of the sciences will furnish data that will be useful to the UFO investigator. Methods of investigating and analyzing UFO reports have improved 100-fold since 1947, and they are continuing to be improved by the diligent work of Captain Charles Hardin, the present chief of Project Blue Book, his staff, and the 4602nd Air Intelligence Squadron. Slowly but surely, these people are working closer to the answer, closer to the proof. Maybe the final proven answer will be that all of the UFOs that have been reported are merely misidentified known objects. Or maybe the many pilots, radar specialists, generals, industrialists, scientists, and the man on the street who have told me, "I wouldn't have believed it either if I hadn't seen it myself," knew what they were talking about. Maybe the Earth is being visited by interplanetary spaceships. Only time will tell. End of Chapter 17. Recording by Roger Moline. Chapter 18 of The Report on Unidentified Flying Object. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects by Edward Ruppelt. Chapter 18. And They're Still Flying. Transcriber's note. The following 3 chapters were added to the second edition text in 1960. 4 years have passed since the first 17 chapters of this book were written. During this period, hundreds of unidentified flying objects have been seen and reported to the Air Force. Pilots with thousands of hours of flying time are still reporting them. Radar operators, experts in their field, are still tracking them. And crews on the missile test ranges are photographing them. UFOs are not just a fad. The Air Force's Project Blue Book is still very active. Not a week passes that one of the many teams of its nationwide investigation net is not in the field investigating a new UFO report. To pick up the history of the UFO, the best place to start is Cincinnati, Ohio, in the late summer of 1955. For some unknown reason, one of those mysterious factors of the UFO, reports from this Hamilton County city suddenly began to pick up. Mass hysteria, the old crutch, wasn't a factor because neither the press, the radio, nor TV was even mentioning the words flying saucer. The reports weren't much in terms of quality. Some lady would see a bobbing white light, or a man putting his car away would see a star jump. These reports, usually passed on to the Air Force through the Air Defense Command's Ground Observer Corps, merely went on the UFO plotting board as a statistic. But before long, in a matter of a week or two, the massive reports began to draw some official attention because the Ground Observer Corps spotters themselves began to make UFO reports. At times during the middle of August, the telephone lines from the GOC observation posts in Hamilton County, Greater Cincinnati, to the filter center in Columbus would be jammed. Now, even the most cynical Air Force types were begrudgingly raising their eyebrows. These GOC observers were about as close to experts as you can get. Many had spent hundreds of hours scanning the skies since the GOC went into the operation in 1952 to close the gaps in our radar net. Many held awards for meritorious service. They weren't crackpots. But still, the cynics held out. This was really nothing new. The Project Blue Book files were full of similar incidents. In 1947, there had been a rash of reports from the Pacific Northwest. In 1948, there had been a similar outbreak at Edwards Air Force Base, the super-secret test center in the Mojave Desert of California. In 1949, the sightings centered in the Midwest. None had panned out to be anything. Then came the clincher. On the night of August 23rd, shortly before midnight, reports of a UFO began to come in from the Mount Healthy GOC observation post northwest of Cincinnati. Almost simultaneously, Air Defense Command radar picked up a target in that area. A minute or two later, the Forestville and Loveland GOC posts, also in Hamilton County, made sightings. Now, 3 UFOs, described as brilliant white spheres, swinging in a pendulum-like motion, were on the ADC plotting boards, confirmed by radar. All pretext of ignoring the UFOs was dropped, and at 11:58 p.m., F-84s of the Ohio Air National Guard were scrambled. They were over Cincinnati at 12:10 a.m. and made contact. Boring in at 20,000 feet at 100% power, they closed, but the UFOs left them as if they were standing still. The battle in the Cincinnati sector was on. Almost every night, more UFOs were reported by the GOC. Attempts were made to scramble interceptors, but there were no more radar contacts, and a jet interceptor without ground guidance is worthless. At the height of this activity, it was decided that more information was needed by the Air Defense Command. Maybe from a mass of data, some kind of clue could be sifted out. The answer? Establish a special UFO reporting post. The man to operate this post was tailor-made. Major Hugh McKenzie of the Columbus Filter Center contacted Leonard H. Stringfield in Cincinnati. Stringfield, besides being a very public-minded citizen, was also known as a level-headed saucer expert. Sooner or later, usually sooner, he heard about every UFO sighting in Hamilton County. He was given a code, Foxtrot Kilo 3-0 Blue, which provided him with an open telephone line to the ADC Filter Center in Columbus. He was in